During the second week of February, the entire state of Texas, along with several other southern states, were gripped by a snow blizzard that blanketed the entire state of Texas, including the state capital, airports, bridges, freeways, and city after city in the whole state of Texas. For the first few hours, kids had a wonderful time looking at snow for the first time, having a smile in their face, enjoying the snow. Even some people took to sliding on the snow slopes. Even I had a few minutes to go and snap a couple of pictures showing my neighborhood with the snow blanketing the entire street, the likes of which we had never seen in decades here in Texas. In fact, this Arctic blizzard has been recorded to be one of the worst possible blizzards in the history of Texas. But that was the good part of the snow blizzard of February 2021. The real trouble started on February 11, 2021, with a 100-car pileup in Fort Worth, Texas, because of ice on the freeway, which was not recognized by the drivers, leading to 6 deaths and more than 65 people having been sent to the hospital. Hours later, a similar episode in San Antonio, where a 26-car pileup resulted in multiple injuries. As I mentioned, Texas was not the only state that was affected by this Arctic snow blizzard. Along with Texas, Oklahoma, Kentucky, Alabama, Mississippi were hard hit by this freezing rain, snow, sleet, blanketing state after state. ERCOT, which is the central body in charge of meeting the demands of the electrical energy in the state of Texas, noticed on February 14th around noontime that the power energy usage was approaching the maximum capacity available in the state of Texas. As a result, they started rolling blackouts in order to reduce the power usage and to keep the power supply above the power usage in the state of Texas, which was to a certain degree a reasonable approach, except the aftermath of this rolling blackouts resulted in a disastrous outcome all across the state of Texas, affecting millions and millions of people. Houstonians were furious to see the city line with high-rise buildings lighted like Christmas trees, while the entire city of Houston was in practical darkness. The cold, frigid weather hit the entire state of Texas, neighborhood after neighborhood, covering the streets and the buildings and roofs with snow and sleet. And in some cases, the roads were like sheets of ice. Some people and some leaders immediately started blaming the wind turbines and the small number of solar panels as the root cause for this power grid failure. Let's really look at the real picture. The wind turbines provide maybe 20 to 25% of the energy in Texas. Solar panels have very small amount except in like individual houses, where we learned that they were not generating any energy whatsoever because of snow coverage. 75% of the energy in Texas comes from non-renewable sources like coal, natural gas, and 10% of the energy comes from the South Texas nuclear power plant. In fact, one of the reactors had to be shut down because of low water pressure. All these compounded to create the most devastating situation in the entire state of Texas. And just to point out, this is how the solar panel farms look in Detroit, and this is from Germany. But we don't have this large amount of solar panels here in Texas, at least to speak of, except for individual house roofs which have solar panels. Let's continue. As I said, the freezing of the turbines were thought to be one of the major causes, but that's just one side of the story. Let's look at what factors accounted for this massive Texas power failure and disaster that followed. North American electrical power grid has mainly three major regions. We have the Western interconnection, we have the Eastern interconnection, and then we have the independent Texas Council for Energy Regulation. There are a few other things that are quite unique to Texas, which might have put Texas in this vulnerable situation in circumstances when we don't expect to see below freezing weather for extended periods of time. Texas has no trade deals with the other two energy grids. As a result, Texas cannot exchange energy freely with the other grids. Texas, in addition, is largely an unregulated industry. There are hundreds and hundreds of energy distributors, energy providers, but no one is taking the responsibility to upgrade the infrastructure to meet the demands of freezing weather. Let's face it, Texas is a state of heat and humidity. No one expected to reach these below freezing frigid temperatures. As a result, none of the Texas power plants were designed to withstand temperatures below freezing. ERCOT, E-R-C-O-T, is the main body that governs the energy supply to Texas. Tucker Carlson from Fox News said that green energy means less reliable power grid. It can also lead to catastrophic failure, the one we have seen in Texas this week. To be honest, turbines failed, yes, but the turbines do work fine in countries like Canada, in Alaska, where they are winterized. They are designed to withstand minus 20 degrees Celsius. Tucker Carlson said, last night the Texas temperature dipped in the numbers seen only in Alaska. There goes the global warming out of the window. Let's look at more pragmatically and practically and see what is the energy source in Texas and why the Texas power grid failed. In Texas, from 2015 to 2019, over 75% of the energy still comes from coal, natural gas, and other sources. About 10 to 11% of the energy comes from nuclear power plant. I already talked about one of the nuclear reactors had to be shut down because of low water pressure. Only about 20% of the energy comes from wind power. Texas has been promoting wind power for the past 15 years. The critics argue, as I mentioned already, the wind turbines were frozen, yes, but the wind turbines do work fine in cold countries like Canada, Alaska. Majority of the energy comes from non-turbine related sources, and even those coal and gas powered energy sources were shut down because of lack of power, and that's something that needs to be addressed by the state of Texas and by the Energy Commission. Governor Abbott has been quite critical of the way that Texas has faced this energy crisis, and he's quite critical of the ERCOT body for being responsible for producing such catastrophic results in the face of the worst winter blizzard in the history of Texas. Governor Abbott signed an executive order preventing any Texas natural gas being exported out of state until February 21st. He also told the reporters that every source of power had been compromised. Let us underscore that. Even though the windmills completely failed, every other source, namely the coal, the natural gas, and the nuclear power plant, all had been compromised due to low water pressure and lack of power supply. So this is one step backward by the governor about other sources of energy not being able to provide the necessary energy for the state of Texas. Governor Abbott has called for an investigation into the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, or ERCOT, an energy cooperative responsible for the vast majority of a state's electricity, to get to the root of the missteps that led to the widespread outages. And he has called for the board members and the executives to resign in the face of this massive, colossal destruction of Texas during this blizzard. What do you think? Is the governor on the right track? Could we have done something better in the period leading up to this winter blizzard and during the blizzard to avert this natural power failure in the entire state of Texas? This power failure left more than 4 to 6 million people without power, many millions without water, and a few thousand were left with busted water lines, bringing their entire livelihood to a standstill in darkness under frigid, cold conditions. More than 590 public water systems in 141 counties have reported disruption of water supply and are advising people to boil water before they use them, while 12 million Texans face water disruptions, impurities in the water, with no power supply even to warm the water. Life has become hell for many people in Texas. When some people jumped up in joy after seeing the electricity returning, only to be dampened by the wet sheetrock falling from their ceilings due to busted water lines. This story is seen all over the social media. It is like almost, which is the next house now that is going to show a picture of a busted ceiling with busted water lines. Here's a question. Your grocery stores have maybe $500,000 worth of groceries, half of them in frozen section. When the entire power goes off in the neighborhood, do the grocery stores have a backup generator to power these refrigerators and freezers to preserve the food at the appropriate temperature? What about those mom and pop grocery stores which are in shopping strips? Do they have generators to support the power energy needed to keep the food at the appropriate temperature? Check with them before you buy these frozen foods after a blackout of 24, 48, 38, or 72 hours. As power started to return, people started to line up to get into the grocery stores. The social distance went off the roof, and the line started getting longer and longer. I was able to see, like at Walmart and Sam's, the lines were a half a mile long. People who had no power, who had no water supply, who had no support had to move to shelters, and some of these shelters also had to be shut down because of the periodic power blackouts. As the city starts to regain from this most devastating effect of snow, sleet, blizzard, cold weather, loss of electricity, busted pipelines, and frozen freeways, what are the solutions going forward? How do we prevent such a catastrophe from happening in the state of Texas? First of all, we need a special investigation of ERCOT, how this massive power failure came across in a state of Texas, which is known for handling crises like hurricane after hurricane after hurricane. We prepare for weeks, if not months, before a hurricane. We prepare for power supplies, power lines, we prepare for flooding, we prepare for so many other things. How come we did not prepare for this in the most prudent manner to prevent the massive interruption of power supply, massive interruption of water supply? Revamping the ERCOT or forming a new body with responsible Texas people on the board may be a good beginning. Winterizing the power grid. It is a very important question, but we have to think about the cost and benefit ratio. Could we have borrowed power from neighboring states in a state of emergency? I certainly think we should have been able to borrow energy at least to support our coal, natural gas power plants. This is one place where Texas could have saved millions of houses from going dark, cold, and frigid. That brings us to the point of having a backup plan. Texas had zero backup plan for energy disaster, for failure. We need to have a backup plan. Texas needs to have an agreement with the neighboring states to supply the oversupply of energy we have during summer months to other states and get energy in situations like this. Well, as of February 17th, this is the scene in the streets of Texas. Whether you go from San Antonio to Houston to Dallas. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a presentation of Triple N Media, Texans Freeze in Darkness, from a historic Arctic snow blizzard of February 2021. I am Dr. NIK NIKAM, and please do subscribe to our channel. We will see you next time.